On the morning of Tegan's wedding day, he arrived at the archery range at sunrise. It was not a joyful or even pleasant morning, and it was only the repetitive exercise keeping his attention that pushed down his frustration. Never in his life had he imagined his wedding day would be like this. A few hours after sunrise, he was joined by Kelvan, a warlock in the service of the Royal Library. They did not speak, but Kelvan watched quietly as Tegan fired arrow after arrow, most hitting the bullseye of each target, but some not quite hitting the center. As the morning stretched on, they remained silent. Everything that needed to be said had already been spoken, and Tegan knew they were only enjoying their last secret moments together. Although he could hardly say he was enjoying the moment, the tension unspoken between them was far from pleasant. Around mid-morning, Tegan's attendant approached them from the castle.
"Prince Tegan, the king has requested your presence in the main courtyard," he said, keeping his gaze carefully away from Kelvan. "The procession is arriving."
Tegan sighed and pulled the quiver off his hip, ignoring the way his fingers trembled. "I'll be there in just a moment," he replied, his eyes flicking over to Kelvan's for an instant. "Leave us. I'll catch up."
"Of course,"
his attendant Eric replied, bowing his head before walking back the way he came. Tegan watched him leave, then turned to face Kelvan again. The other man's face was grim. "This is goodbye," Tegan said, slowly stepping toward him. He touched Kelvan's arm. Kelvan met his gaze for only a moment before looking away. "For now," he replied tersely, and Tegan lowered his eyes. Each time they had spoken, he still clung to the hope things would change, lingering in denial about what was happening. But Kelvan seemed to sense his thoughts and added, "I know. It is your duty. But I will miss this." "I know," Tegan said. He could think of nothing else to say. Kelvan helped him retrieve the rest of his arrows and took his bow and quiver so he could leave quickly. Their hands touched as he passed over the equipment, and they shared one last look before Tegan turned and was gone. He pulled a formal robe over the clothes he was already wearing. No point in changing now when his servants would bathe and dress him in the early afternoon in preparation for the wedding. It took only a few moments for him to make his way to the main courtyard, where his father and a small cohort of royal guards were waiting. King Reuven was already dressed in his finery, although it was rare for him not to be dressed exquisitely any time he might be seen in public. The Elven King nodded at him as he approached, his long dark hair falling in front of his face as he did so. Tegan responded with a polite bow of his head, coming to stand at his father's side. "Were you at the archery range?" the king asked. Tegan nodded, and Reuven sighed before reaching over to touch his shoulder lightly. "I know this is not ideal," he continued, still looking toward the main gate of the castle grounds. "But our responsibilities are a double-edged blade. They come with duties as unpleasant as the privileges they allow us to enjoy." "I understand," Tegan replied, and he truly did. As the only child of King Reuven and the late king consort Elaine, his other father, he had known since childhood that it was all but impossible that he might marry for love alone. But he had expected to marry another elven noble, perhaps even a human royal, to strengthen the ties between nations. To marry a sworn enemy of the elves, the enemy he had trained since his youth to fight against and to lead armies to conquer. This was unprecedented in all aspects.